The fluorescent lights of Mercy Falls Hospital hummed their eternal song at 3:47 in the morning. Henry Morrison stood at his post by the emergency entrance, shoulders squared, despite the weight of 68 years and 28 years of night shifts pressing down on them. His uniform navy blue, with patches worn thin at the elbows, hung loose on a frame that had once carried 180 pounds of marine-trained muscle. Now, it carried memories. The wind off the desert cut through the parking lot, rattling the chain-link fence that separated the hospital from the highway beyond. Henry pulled his jacket tighter. The zipper had broken 3 months ago. He'd meant to fix it. He'd meant to fix a lot of things. In his left breast pocket, wrapped in plastic to keep it safe, sat a photograph. Sarah Morrison, taken on their 40th anniversary. Her smile could still make his chest tighten, even though she'd been gone 3 years now. 3 years, 2 months and 16 days. But who was counting? His right pocket held something heavier. A crumpled envelope from Children's Oncology Associates. The words inside didn't change no matter how many times he read them. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, high-risk classification, bone marrow transplant required. Estimated cost $180,000. Timeline critical. Emma, 7 years old. Brown curls that bounced when she laughed. Her father's eyes. Michael's eyes. Staff Sergeant Michael Morrison killed by an IED outside Kandahar on September 14, 2011. Henry's only son. Gone at 32, leaving behind a daughter who would never remember him and a wife who remembered too much. Henry checked his watch. 4 hours left in his shift. 4 hours at $9.50 an hour, minus taxes. The math was simple and cruel. At this rate, working every available shift, no days off, no sick leave, he'd have the money Emma needed in approximately 47 years. He'd be 115. The sound of squealing tires cut through his thoughts. Headlights swept across the parking lot, moving too fast. An old Chevrolet sedan, early 90s model blue paint, oxidized to grey, skidded to a stop at the emergency entrance. The driver's side door flew open before the engine died. A woman stumbled out. Mid-30s hospital scrubs, stained with what looked like motor oil and blood. Her hands shook as she wrenched open the back door. Help. Please, somebody help. Henry was moving before his mind caught up to his legs. 43 years since Kaysan, but the training never left. Assess. Act. Survive. The boy in the back seat couldn't have been more than 8. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, eyes rolling back in his head. A makeshift bandage looked like a torn T-shirt wrapped around his left leg, soaked through with blood. The fabric pulsed with each heartbeat. Arterial bleed. Henry had seen enough of them to know. What happened? Henry's voice came out steady. Strange how calm descended in crisis, how the chaos of the present could feel so much like the chaos of the past. Car accident. Pickup truck ran a red light, T-boned us on the passenger side. My boy Marcus's leg, there was so much blood I couldn't stop it. I tried. The words tumbled out between sobs. Henry pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck. Pulse weak, rapid, skin clammy, going into shock. Minutes mattered, maybe less. I'm calling it in. Henry pulled his radio from his belt, already moving toward the entrance. Emergency entrance, critical pediatric trauma, suspected femoral artery damage patient, showing signs of hypovolemic shock. The automatic doors slid open. The emergency department spread before them, bright and sterile and blessedly close. 2 nurses at the station looked up. Henry recognized both of them. Janet Pierce, 20 years in the ER, could start an IV in a moving ambulance. Tom Chen, newer but sharp, didn't panic. Get me a gurney! The mother's voice cracked with desperation. Janet was already moving Tom right behind her. But before they reached the door, another voice cut through the organized chaos. Stop! Dr. Victoria Sterling emerged from her office like a shark smelling blood in the water. Early 40s, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, white coat pristine despite the hour. She'd been appointed medical director 6 months ago. In those 6 months, Mercy Falls Hospital had become more profitable and less merciful. Ma'am, you need to go to registration first. Dr. Sterling's voice carried the warmth of a computer-generated phone menu. The mother stared at her, comprehension struggling against panic. What my son is bleeding, he needs hospital policy, registration before treatment, insurance verification is mandatory. Janet Pierce's face flushed red. Victoria, for God's sake, the kid is... The policy is clear, Nurse Pierce. Dr. Sterling's eyes could have frozen the desert. We've had 3 uninsured patients this week alone. The hospital cannot continue to absorb these costs. If she has insurance, she can verify it at registration. If she doesn't... The sentence hung in the air, unfinished, but unmistakable. I work 2 jobs. I'm trying to save up for insurance next month, but right now, please my baby. Dr. Sterling's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. Then, I'm afraid we cannot admit him. There's a county hospital 40 minutes south. They have an obligation to treat regardless of ability to pay. 40 minutes. Henry looked at the boy, at the blood-soaked bandage, at the eyes that had stopped rolling and started staring at nothing. 40 minutes was a death sentence. The mother collapsed to her knees, clutching at Dr. Sterling's coat. Please, please, I'll pay whatever it takes. I'll work it off. I'll sign anything. Please don't let my baby die. Dr. Sterling stepped back, brushing at her coat where the woman had touched it. Security, please escort this woman to her vehicle. Something cold settled in Henry's chest. Not anger. Anger was hot, explosive, quick to burn out. This was something else. Something forged in rice paddies and fire-base perimeters in the space between heartbeats when you decided whether you were the kind of person who acted or the kind who looked away. He'd made this choice before. Khe-Sanh, 1969. Firebase under siege mortars falling like rain. A lance corporal couldn't have been more than 19, caught in the open femoral artery severed by shrapnel. 300 yards of open ground between them. Every Marine in that firebase knew that ground was a kill zone. Anyone who tried to cross it was dead. Henry had crossed it anyway. He'd carried that lance corporal back through 400 yards of hell mortar rounds, cratering the earth, small arms fire, cutting the air like scissors through paper. Took a round through his left shoulder, didn't even feel it until they were back behind the wire. The corporal lived. Henry got a Purple Heart and a reputation as either the bravest or the stupidest man in the company. Probably both. 43 years later, standing in a hospital parking lot at 4 in the morning, the math was different, but the choice was the same. How much? Henry's voice cut through the mother's sobs. Dr. Sterling turned, noticing him for the first time. Excuse me. How much to treat him? Emergency surgery, stabilization, whatever he needs. How much? Morrison, this isn't your concern. Return to your post. How much? Something flickered in Dr. Sterling's eyes. Calculation. Quick mental arithmetic. Emergency arterial repair anesthesia or time post-op observation. Conservatively, $8,000. Up front. $8,000. Henry had $8,217 in his savings account. Every penny he had in the world. Money scraped together over 3 years, working doubles and triples, skipping meals, wearing shoes until the soles separated from the leather. Money for Emma. Money for bone marrow that would save her life. $8,000 stood between this boy and death. $180,000 stood between Emma and death. The math was simple. Brutal. Impossible. Henry looked at the boy, Marcus. The mother had called him Marcus. His chest still rose and fell, but shallower now, faster. The body's last, desperate attempt to circulate blood that wasn't there anymore. 3 months. That's what the oncologist had said. Emma had 3 months before the leukemia progressed beyond treatment. This boy had 3 minutes. Maybe less. Sarah's voice drifted up from memory. They'd been married 42 years. He knew what she'd say, knew it in his bones. Do the right thing, Henry. We didn't raise our son to be a hero, so you could be a coward. Henry pulled out his wallet. Inside a debit card connected to an account with $8,217. His hand didn't shake as he held it out. Take it. Treat him. Dr. Sterling's eyebrows rose. Morrison, do you understand what you're... I understand. Treat him. Now. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Dr. Sterling took the card, her expression unreadable. She swiped it through the portable reader on her tablet. The seconds stretched like taffy while the transaction processed. Approved. Get him to OR2, Dr. Sterling said to the nurses. Dr. Patterson is on call. And Morrison, see me in my office after we stabilize the patient. Janet and Tom moved like a symphony gurney appearing. Marcus transferred with practiced efficiency, mother following behind, still crying but now with hope mixed in with the desperation. The automatic doors closed behind them. Henry stood alone in the parking lot as the sun began its slow climb above the horizon. His wallet felt lighter, his chest felt heavier. He'd saved a boy's life. He'd killed his granddaughter. The math was that simple. The surgical team worked for 90 minutes. Henry knew because he watched the clock above the emergency entrance counting every second. At 5:47 a.m., Janet Pierce emerged, pulling off her surgical cap. She found him at his post, still standing, still watching. He's going to make it. She said it quietly, like a prayer answered. Another 10 minutes and we'd have lost him. You saved that boy's life, Henry. Henry nodded. Words seemed pointless. Doctor, Sterling wants to see you. I know. Janet's hand found his shoulder, squeezed. She'd been there the night Michael's body came home. She'd held Sarah when the grief became too much. She knew. I'm sorry, she whispered. Henry climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The elevator was faster, but he needed the time. Needed to feel his legs move, his heart pump, his lungs fill. Needed to remember he was still alive, even if he'd just signed Emma's death warrant. Dr. Sterling sat behind her desk, fingers steepled, face carved from ice. Sit. Henry remained standing. Fine. Stand if you prefer. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Henry's personnel file. 28 years of performance reviews, incident reports, commendations. His entire career at Mercy Falls Hospital reduced to paper. What you did tonight was wildly inappropriate, Dr. Sterling said. You're a security guard, not a medical professional. You inserted yourself into a medical situation. You pressured hospital staff. And perhaps most significantly, you violated about 17 different hospital policies regarding financial procedures and patient privacy. Henry said nothing. I could terminate you for cause, effective immediately. No severance, no references. She paused, watching him, waiting for what? Begging anger. Henry gave her nothing. However, she continued, I'm willing to overlook this incident. You've been here a long time. You're reliable. You show up. In exchange for my leniency, I'll need you to sign this. She slid a paper across the desk. Henry picked it up. Legal language dense and thorny, but the core message was clear. He acknowledged wrongdoing, accepted a formal reprimand, agreed never to discuss the incident with staff or patients, and waived any right to legal action against the hospital or its administrators. At the bottom, a signature line. Sign it, and we forget this happened. You keep your job, your benefits, your pension. Door. Sterling leaned back in her chair. Don't sign it, and I'll have security escort you out within the hour. Your choice. Henry looked at the paper. At the words that would erase what he'd done, turn an act of mercy into a violation. He thought about Emma, about the money he no longer had, about the 3 months before the leukemia one. He thought about Marcus alive in a hospital bed 2 floors below. He thought about that Lance Corporal at Kaysan who'd gone on to have 3 kids and 7 grandkids, who sent Henry a Christmas card every year with a note that always said the same thing, "Thank you for my life." Henry set the paper down unsigned. No. Dr. Sterling's expression finally changed. Not to anger, to something colder. Satisfaction, maybe, like she'd been hoping for this. Then you're terminated, effective immediately. Hand over your badge and radio. Henry unclipped both from his belt, set them on the desk with a soft click. I'll need you to vacate the premises within 15 minutes. Security will escort you to collect your personal effects. Don't have any. Then you can leave now. Dr. Sterling picked up her phone, pressed a button. Send someone to escort Mr. Morrison out. The walk to the exit took less than 2 minutes. Roger Jenkins' day shift security did the honors. They'd worked together for 16 years. Roger wouldn't meet his eyes. Sorry, Henry. Not your fault, Rog. The automatic doors slid open one last time. The sun had fully risen now, turning the desert sky into shades of copper and gold. Beautiful morning. Sarah had always loved mornings like this. Henry's car sat in the far corner of the employee lot. A 1998 Ford Taurus burgundy paint faded to pink, 237,000 miles on the odometer. The transmission had been slipping for a month. The front right tire was bald. The air conditioning had died during the Clinton administration. He'd been planning to fix it. After Emma was better. After he had money again. After. Henry slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught with a cough that sounded terminal. He put it in reverse, backed out, shifted to drive. The transmission made a sound like bones breaking. The car rolled forward 3 feet, then stopped. Henry tried reverse. Nothing. Drive. Nothing. The transmission had finally given up the ghost. He sat in the dead car as the sun climbed higher, painting everything in shades of gold that made the world look beautiful and cruel. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, knowing who it would be before he looked. Linda, his daughter-in-law, Emma's mother. Where are you? Emma's appointment is at 9. We need to talk about the money. Henry stared at the message, at the words, at the question he couldn't answer. He typed, spent the money. We'll explain later. He hit send before he could change his mind. The phone rang immediately. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. Again. 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 Finally, silence. Then a text. What do you mean you spent it? Spent it on? What? Another. Henry, answer your phone. Another. You spent Emma's money. Are you insane? Another. I can't believe you. I can't. After everything. The messages kept coming, each one shorter, sharper, cutting like glass. Henry read them all. He deserved every word. At 7:30 a.m. a different message arrived. Don't come to the house. Don't call. Don't try to see Emma. I mean it, Henry. I never want to see you again. Henry put the phone in his pocket, climbed out of the car. The walk from Mercy Falls Hospital to Linda's house was 11 miles. He'd walked farther in Vietnam, carrying more weight through worse terrain. He started walking. The Arizona sun climbed higher as Henry Morrison walked east on Route 89 hospital scrubs, traded for jeans and a flannel shirt that had belonged to Michael. Cars passed him in both directions, some slowing like they might stop and offer a ride, then speeding up again when they got a good look at him. Old man walking alone, probably homeless, probably trouble. Henry didn't blame them. He looked like a man who'd lost everything because he had. By 9 a.m. he'd covered 3 miles. His feet hurt. The work boots he wore were the same ones he'd bought in 2007, good leather, but the soles had compressed to nothing. Every pebble felt like a boulder. His phone buzzed constantly for the first hour. Linda, mostly. Then Emma's oncologist's office. Then someone from the hospital billing department. Henry let them all go to voicemail. What was he supposed to say? That he'd chosen a stranger's child over his own granddaughter? That he'd thrown away their last hope because a woman he didn't know had begged, and he couldn't look away? The truth didn't make it better. It just made it real. At the 4-mile mark, a Mercy Falls police cruiser pulled up beside him, lights off, but pace matching his walking speed. The window rolled down. Officer Martinez, young guy, maybe 30. Henry had caught him sleeping on duty twice but never reported it. Everyone deserved grace sometimes. Mr. Morrison, you okay? Fine. Car trouble. Something like that. Need a lift? Henry shook his head. Appreciate it, but I'm good. Martinez frowned. It's going to hit 108 today. You sure? I'm sure. The cruiser followed him for another quarter mile before Martinez gave up and drove off. Henry kept walking. The landscape here was all scrub brush and red rock, beautiful in that harsh desert way that either spoke to your soul or made you want to flee to somewhere green. Sarah had loved it. Grew up in Oregon, all rain and ferns, but she'd taken one look at the Arizona desert and said it felt like coming home. Henry had never understood it until after she was gone. Now he got it. The desert didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Hard, unforgiving, honest. By 10 a.m. he'd covered 6 miles. His water bottle filled before he left the hospital was empty. His throat felt like sandpaper. Heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves. A pickup truck slowed beside him. Older gentleman at the wheel, maybe 70, wearing a Vietnam veteran's ball cap. "Brother, you look like you could use some water." Henry stopped. The man was already climbing out, reaching into a cooler in the truck bed. He pulled out a bottle of water, cold enough that condensation dripped down the sides. "Here, don't argue." Henry took it, drank half in one long pull. "Thank you. Where are you headed?" "Miller Road." The man whistled. "That's another 5 miles. "I know. Get in. I'll take you." Henry hesitated. The water was one thing, you could accept water. But a ride meant conversation, meant explaining, meant being known. "I don't want to trouble you." "Brother, I'm 72 years old and retired. All I got is time and trouble. Get in the damn truck." Henry climbed in. They drove in silence for the first mile. Then the man said, "You got the look." "What look?" "The look of a man who did something right that cost him everything." The old man kept his eyes on the road. "I know because I had that look once. Long time ago. Saigon, 1973. Embassy about to fall. Had room on a helicopter for 5. Vietnamese family, mother, father, 3 kids begging to get on. My CO said no. Not our people, not our problem." The truck hummed down the highway. "I put that family on the helicopter. Left 3 Marines behind. Good men. Friends. They got out eventually, but I didn't know that at the time. Far as I knew, I'd just signed their death warrants to save people I didn't know." "What happened?" Henry's voice came out rough. "Those Marines forgave me. Took some time, but they forgave me. The Vietnamese family. I got a letter last year. The father died, but the mother's still alive. Those 3 kids grew up, had kids of their own, had grandkids. 15 people alive today, because I broke the rules." He glanced at Henry. "I'm guessing yours is something similar." Henry told him. All of it. Marcus, the money, Emma, Linda. It poured out like blood from an artery, unstoppable once it started. The old man listened until Henry finished. Then he said, "You did good." "I killed my granddaughter." "No, you saved a boy who was dying. Those aren't the same thing. The money comes and goes. Character doesn't." The truck pulled onto Miller Road. "Which house?" 1223. The house came into view. Small ranch-style beige stucco red tile roof. Chain-link fence around a yard that had more dirt than grass. A tire swing hanging from the one tree. Michael had installed that swing the week before he deployed. Emma had been 3. "This is me," Henry said. The truck stopped. The old man reached into his wallet, pulled out a $50 bill. "Take it." "I can't." "You can, and you will. Because one day when you're back on your feet, you'll find someone who needs $50 more than you do, and you'll give it to them. That's how it works." Henry took the money. His hand shook. "Thank you. Thank you, brother, for being the kind of man who still does the right thing." The old man's eyes were bright. "Not many of us left." Henry climbed out. The truck pulled away, and he stood alone on Miller Road, staring at the house that held his granddaughter and his daughter-in-law, and an anger he'd earned. He walked to the door. Knocked. No answer. Knocked again. The door opened, 6 inches, stopped by a chain. Linda's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were red, swollen. She'd been crying for hours. "Go away." "Linda, please. You spent Emma's money, her only chance. For what? For some random kid. Who are you?" He was dying. He had minutes. "And Emma has months. Don't you get it? You chose wrong." Her voice broke. "You chose wrong, Henry. You chose a stranger over your own blood." "I chose a child who would die without help over a child who still had time." Time. The doctor said 3 months. What are we supposed to do in 3 months? Rob a bank, win the lottery. Tears streamed down her face. "You were supposed to protect her. Michael died protecting strangers, and now you're doing the same thing, and I can't lose both of you." She choked on a sob, slammed the door. Henry stood on the porch staring at wood grain. Inside he could hear Emma's voice. "Mommy? Is that Grandpa?" "No, baby. Nobody's there." "But I heard—" "Emma, please go watch TV." Small footsteps fading. Then Linda's voice again, barely audible. "God damn you, Henry Morrison. God damn you." Henry sat down on the porch. His body felt ancient, every joint aching, every muscle screaming. He was 68 years old. He'd survived Vietnam, survived 30 years of marriage and 12 more as a widower, survived losing his only son to war and his wife to cancer. He'd thought he'd survived everything life could throw at him. He'd been wrong. The sun climbed toward noon. The temperature climbed with it. Henry sat on the porch and watched the street where nothing moved except heat shimmer. His phone buzzed occasionally. He didn't check it. Around 1 p.m. a car pulled up. Not Linda's car. A black Cadillac, new expensive. The driver's door opened and a woman emerged. Business suit despite the heat briefcase heels that clicked on the concrete. She walked up the driveway like she owned it. "Henry Morrison." "Who's asking?" "Teresa Holt, attorney representing Mercy Falls Hospital. Dr. Sterling asked me to deliver these." She pulled an envelope from her briefcase, held it out. Henry took it. Inside, legal documents, termination papers. Final paycheck minus taxes $417, and something else a bill, for improper use of hospital resources and violation of financial protocols. $8,000 due in 30 days or legal action would be pursued. They were billing him for saving Marcus's life. Henry stared at the papers, at the numbers, at the casual cruelty of bureaucracy reducing life and death to line items and policies. "This needs to be signed and returned within 7 days. Teresa Holt's voice carried all the warmth of a tax audit. "If you have questions, you can reach our office at the number on the letterhead." She walked back to the Cadillac, drove away. Henry sat on the porch holding papers that said he owed $8,000 he didn't have for saving a life that wasn't supposed to matter. The math was insane. The math was America. The sun climbed higher. At 3 p.m. Henry's phone rang. Not Linda this time. An unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Morrison." A man's voice, deep gravelly with an accent that might have been Texas. "Speaking. My name is Jacob Cross. I'm Marcus Taylor's great-uncle. I'm calling to say thank you." The words took a moment to land. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. Kelly told me what you did, what it cost you. I'm at the hospital now with Marcus. He's going to make it because of you. I'm glad. Mr. Morrison Kelly told me about the bill, about your job, About your granddaughter. A pause. I'd like to help. That's not necessary. With respect, sir, it absolutely is. Can you meet me? I'm at the hospital, but I can come to you. I don't... Please. I need to thank you in person. I need to look you in the eye. Something in the man's voice made Henry say yes. They arranged to meet at a diner on Route 89 halfway between. Henry would walk there. Should take about an hour. He stood, joints protesting, folded the papers from the lawyer and put them in his pocket. Started walking. The diner was called Rosie's Chrome and Neon Unchanged since 1953. Henry had eaten here with Sarah exactly once on their first anniversary. Cheeseburgers and milkshakes and young love that thought it would live forever. Jacob Cross was already there when Henry arrived. Hard to miss him. 6'2", maybe 230 arms like bridge cables, grey-beard eyes that had seen things and survived them. He wore a leather vest over a white t-shirt. The vest had patches, military insignia. Henry recognized the symbols. Marines, Force Recon, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Vietnam. Jacob stood when Henry entered, extended a hand that swallowed Henry's. Mr. Morrison, Jacob Cross. Henry. Sit. Please. I ordered coffee. They sat across from each other in a booth that had probably heard 1,000 conversations just like this one. Two old men scarred by different wars connected by blood that wasn't theirs. Kelly told me everything, Jacob said. About the money. Your granddaughter. The job. All of it. It was the right thing to do. That doesn't make it easy. The coffee arrived. Henry wrapped his hands around the mug, feeling warmth seep into joints that ached from 11 miles of walking in desert heat. I want to help, Jacob said. I want to cover the 8,000 the hospital's billing you. I want to help with your granddaughter's treatment, all of it. Henry shook his head. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I didn't do it for money. I did it because... He stopped, tried to find words for something that lived deeper than language. I did it because that's who I am, who my wife raised me to be, who my son died being. And if I take money for it, then it becomes a transaction. And it wasn't a transaction, it was just... right. Jacob studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to something else. Something gentle. 1969 Firebase Khe-Sanh. Do you remember? Henry went very still. Lance Corporal Jacob Cross, 2nd Battalion 26th Marines, caught in the open during a mortar attack, femoral artery severed. Every man in that firebase knew crossing that open ground was suicide. Jacob's eyes held Henry's. One man crossed it anyway. Carried me 400 yards through hell. Took a round through his shoulder. Got me back to the medics. Saved my life. The diner seemed to shrink. The world reduced to two men, 2 moments separated by 43 years. The medic never told me his name, Jacob continued. By the time I came out of surgery, he'd been medevaced to Da Nang. I spent 43 years looking for him, checking records, calling veterans organizations, tracking down every medic who served at Khe-Sanh. And 2 days ago, Marcus's mother tells me a hospital security guard used his life savings to save her son. An old man, 68, former Navy corpsman, served in Vietnam. Jacob reached into his pocket, pulled out a small black and white photograph, faded, creased, held together with tape. 2 young men in combat fatigues, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling like they'd just survived the impossible. Because they had. That's us, Jacob said. Christmas 1969. You don't remember. You'd saved 17 guys by then. I was just another Marine. But you were the only reason I made it home. Henry stared at the photograph, at faces separated from him by 4 decades and a war that still woke him up at night. He remembered that day. Remembered all of them. Every Marine he'd carried, every wound he'd packed, every prayer he'd whispered into the ears of dying boys. You went on to become a doctor, Henry said quietly. I remember. You told me you were going to med school when you got home. I did. 32 years as a trauma surgeon. Retired 5 years ago. And every life I saved because you saved me first. Jacob leaned forward. Henry, you gave me my life. You gave me everything that came after. I have 3 daughters, 7 grandchildren. I've been married to the same woman for 40 years. I've saved maybe 1,000 lives in my career. And none of it happens if you don't cross that field. You don't owe me. I owe you everything. And I'm not the only one. Jacob pulled out his phone, typed something, then turned the screen toward Henry. A text message thread. Dozens of names. all of them saying the same thing I'm in, whatever he needs. These are the men from Kesan, the ones you saved, the ones who survived. We've been looking for you for 43 years. Jacob's voice went rough. We found you, brother, and we're not letting you stand alone, not after you carried us home. Before Henry could respond, the diner door opened, then another and another. Old men filed in, 70s, some 80s, grey beards and bald heads and bodies marked by time and war. They wore leather vests covered in patches. They moved with the confidence of men who'd survived the unsurvivable. They were Marines. They were his. One by one, they approached the booth, shook his hand, said names he remembered from dog tags and firefights and letters home, said thank you in voices that cracked with emotion held back for 4 decades. By the time the last one arrived, Rosie's diner held 37 men who shouldn't have lived past 1969. They lived because Henry Morrison had crossed a kill zone 37 times. Jacob stood addressed the room. Brothers, this is Henry Morrison, Navy Corpsman, 2nd Battalion, 26th Marines Firebase, Kesan, the man who saved us. The man who just gave his last dollar to save my great-nephew, the man who lost his job, his car, and maybe his family doing the right thing. He turned back to Henry. We're here to return the favor. The diner erupted in applause. Henry sat in the booth surrounded by ghosts made flesh and wept for the first time since Sarah died. Outside, the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, and in the distance, growing louder by the second, came the sound of engines. 187 Harley-Davidson motorcycles rolled toward Rosie's diner like a promise-kept black chrome and leather American flags and military patches, the physical manifestation of brotherhood that transcended time. They arrived in formation, stopped as one engine's cutting off in perfect synchronization. The silence that followed held more weight than sound ever could. Henry Morrison stood at the window watching warriors dismount, and understood for the first time in 3 days that he hadn't destroyed his life by choosing right over easy. He'd just proven that the right choice was never the wrong one, even when it cost everything. The Brotherhood had found him, and they would carry him home, just like he'd carried them. The sound started as a whisper on the horizon, a low rumble that could have been distant thunder if the sky hadn't been cloudless and blue. Inside Rosie's diner, conversation stopped. Heads turned toward the windows, coffee cups paused halfway to lips. Henry Morrison felt it before he heard it. A vibration in his chest, rhythmic and deep like a heartbeat that didn't belong to him. The 37 men around him, Marines who'd survived Kesan, who'd outlived a war that tried to kill them, stood straighter. Something in their posture changed. Recognition. Brotherhood. The rumble grew louder, became something more. Not just noise, but symphony. Not just machines, but purpose made audible. Jacob Cross walked to the window, pulled back the faded yellow curtain. His face transformed lines, smoothing eyes brightening 20 years falling away in an instant. They're here. Through the glass, Henry watched them come. Not a mob or a gang, but a river of steel and leather flowing down Route 89 with the precision of a military operation. The lead rider appeared first, chrome catching sunlight like a beacon American flag snapping in the wind. Behind him came another, then 5 more, then 20, then a flood of motorcycles that seemed to have no end. 187 Harley-Davidsons filled the parking lot of Rosie's diner in a V formation so perfect it looked choreographed. The lead rider raised his fist. Every engine cut off simultaneously. The silence felt sacred. Henry stood slowly, knees protesting but holding. Through the window, he watched men dismount. Most were older 60s, 70s, some pushing 80. But they moved with the deliberate grace of warriors who'd learned that survival meant efficiency. Bodies marked by time and battle. Faces weathered by years of wind and sun and choices that left scars. What is this? Henry's voice came out rough. Jacob's hand found his shoulder. This is the Brotherhood of the Fallen. Every man out there is a veteran. Every man out there knows what it means to be saved by someone who didn't have to save them. And every man out there knows your name now. The diner door opened. The lead rider entered 6'3", maybe 260 beard, more white than grey eyes that assessed and catalogued everything in 2 seconds flat. His leather vest told stories in patches, 82nd Airborne Ranger tab, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, with V device deployment patches from Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. Jacob. The man's voice sounded like gravel shifting in a cement mixer. Marcus. Jacob stepped forward. They embraced the way brothers do, hard, brief, weighted with years of shared understanding. Henry Morrison, meet Marcus Reeves, President of the Brotherhood. Best damn soldier I ever served with. Marcus Reeves turned to Henry. extended a hand with calluses that spoke of work and weapons and miles of road. "Mr. Morrison, honor to meet you." Henry shook his hand, felt strength that age hadn't diminished. "I don't understand what's happening." "You will. Step outside." The afternoon sun hit Henry like physical force when he walked through the door. Heat and light and the smell of leather and motor oil and something else, purpose maybe. The thing that happened when men who'd survived impossible things recognized each other across time and distance. 187 men stood at attention beside their motorcycles. They ranged from mid-50s to early 80s. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, every shade of America represented. But the patches on their vests told one unified story. Warriors. Every single one. Marcus Reeves climbed onto a picnic table, voice carrying across the parking lot without strain or amplification. "Brothers, this is Henry Morrison, Navy Corpsman, 2nd Battalion, 26th Marines Firebase, Khe Sanh, 1969. Saved 37 Marines under fire, took a round through the shoulder and kept working, was medevaced to Da Nang and disappeared into paperwork." He paused. "Until now." Murmurs rippled through the assembled men, not surprised they knew. Recognition, respect, understanding. "Yesterday," Marcus continued, his voice hardening like steel under pressure. "Henry Morrison used his last dollar to save a dying child, lost his job for it, lost his car, maybe lost his family, did it anyway because that's who he is." His jaw set. The hospital that fired him is now billing him $8,000 for the privilege of saving a life on their property. His granddaughter has leukemia, needs a bone marrow transplant, $180,000. He's got nothing. The silence grew edges. "We were founded on a promise," Marcus said. "When we find the good ones, the people who still give a damn, who still do the right thing when it costs them everything, we stand with them. We lift them up. We make sure they don't stand alone." He turned to Henry. "Brother, you carried our people home when no one else would. Now we carry you." As 187 men straightened to attention. Right hands rose in salute, crisp, perfect holding, until Marcus lowered his hand. Henry's vision blurred. 43 years collapsed into a single moment. He was 25 again, standing in a firebase at the edge of the world, surrounded by Marines who trusted him with their lives. He was 68 again, standing in a diner parking lot in Arizona, surrounded by men who'd spent decades looking for him to say thank you. The weight of both moments settled on his shoulders like a cloak woven from memory and meaning. "At ease," Marcus called. Hands dropped. "Now let's figure out how to help our brother." They moved inside, though inside proved impossible. 187 men couldn't fit in Rosie's diner. Half remained in the parking lot, sitting on tables and hoods and the ground. The rest filled every booth and chair and space where a human could stand. Rosie, herself 70 if she was a day, grey hair in a bun apron printed with coffee stains and the words, "Eat or get out," took one look at the assembled warriors and started brewing coffee in industrial quantities. "On the house," she said when Marcus tried to pay. "My daddy was 1st Marine Division chosen reservoir. Froze half to death in Korea so I could serve coffee in Arizona. He'd have wanted me to feed you." Jacob and Marcus sat across from Henry in the booth that had become Command Central. Between them they spread papers, termination notice, hospital bill, Emma's treatment estimates, Linda's mortgage statements. "How did you get these?" Henry asked, looking at documents Linda shouldn't have shared. "Linda and I talked this morning," Jacob said quietly. "After Kelly told her who I was, what you did for Marcus, what Marcus means to me." He paused. "She's processing. Anger and gratitude fighting for space. Give her time." Processing. Clinical word for a daughter-in-law who'd banished him from her home and her daughter's life. Marcus studied the papers with the intensity of someone solving tactical problems. "Okay, here's what we're looking at. 8,000 for the hospital. 180,000 for Emma's treatment. Linda's mortgage is 3 months behind another 4,200. Car's dead costs maybe 1,500 to fix or replace." He pulled out a calculator, started adding. "Call it 200,000 round numbers to solve immediate crisis." Henry's stomach twisted. Spoken aloud, the number transformed from abstract impossibility to concrete nightmare. "We've got it," Marcus said simply. Henry blinked. "What?" "We've got it. The Brotherhood runs on donations and fundraising. We've helped over 4,000 families in 30 years. We maintain reserves for situations exactly like this." Marcus pulled out his phone, typed with thumbs that moved faster than seemed possible for someone his age. "I'm authorizing a disbursement of $200,000 to Henry Morrison effective immediately." "I can't accept that." "You can. You will." I didn't do what I did for money. We know. Jacob's voice carried the weight of lived experience. That's exactly why we're giving it to you. Henry, do you know how rare you are in a world where people film themselves doing good deeds for internet points? You gave everything and asked for nothing. You're what we're looking for. You're what we protect. A man approached the booth, late 60s, black-built like someone who'd spent decades lifting things heavier than most people could imagine. His patches said Army Ranger and 2 Purple Hearts. Marcus, we've got a situation. What kind? Local PD just showed up. 12 units. Someone called in a disturbance. They're saying we're an illegal gathering. Through the window, Henry saw the police cars, lights flashing, officers emerging with hands near weapons, but not on them yet. His chest tightened. This was his fault. Everything was his fault. Marcus stood. I'll handle it. I'm coming too, Jacob said. They walked out together, the rest of the brotherhood forming up behind them in loose ranks. Henry followed on legs that felt disconnected from his body. Outside, a dozen Mercy Falls police officers stood in a semicircle led by a sergeant Henry didn't recognize. Young guy, maybe 35, hand resting on his holster, jaw set in the universal expression of authority, preparing for confrontation. Which one of you is in charge? The sergeant called. Marcus stepped forward. That would be me. Marcus Reeves, president of the Brotherhood of the Fallen, registered 501c3 non-profit tax ID on file with the IRS if you need it. We got calls about gang activity, illegal assembly, public disturbance. We're veterans having coffee. Marcus's voice stayed level, reasonable, completely unbothered. Last I checked, that was legal in Arizona. The sergeant's eyes scanned the assembled men, the motorcycles, the leather and patches and hard faces. You're intimidating the public. We're existing in public. Different thing. Tension built like pressure in a sealed container. Henry felt it in the way hands moved closer to weapons in shoulders, squaring in the calculations happening behind eyes on both sides. This could explode. Fast. Then one of the officers stepped forward. Older than the sergeant, maybe 50 stripes that said 20 years on the force. He stared at Marcus, then at Jacob, then at the assembled brotherhood. His hand fell away from his weapon. Stand down. The sergeant turned. Sir. I said, stand down, Hendricks. The older officer, his nameplate read, Davis, walked forward until he stood directly in front of Marcus. Extended his hand. Sergeant Davis, Mercy Falls PD, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Fallujah, 2004. You pulled me out. Marcus shook his hand, recognition lighting his face. Corporal Davis, right building collapse. You were trapped for 6 hours. You remembered? Davis's voice cracked slightly. You and your team pulled me out of rubble. Carried me 3 blocks through sniper fire to a medic station. He paused, composing himself. My daughter graduated college last month. Got married 2 weeks ago. I walked her down the aisle. Because of you. He turned to the assembled officers, most of whom now looked uncertain rather than confrontational. These men aren't a gang. They're the Brotherhood of the Fallen. They're a non-profit that helps veterans and families in crisis. They've saved more lives than all of us combined. He looked back at Marcus. What can we do to help? The Sergeant Hendricks looked like he'd bitten into something rotten. We still got complaints. Then we'll tell the complainers to mind their business, Davis said firmly. These men are welcome in Mercy Falls as long as they want to stay. To Marcus. Anything you need, you call me directly. Hendricks opened his mouth closed. It stalked back to his cruiser with the rigid posture of authority undermined. The other officers relaxed some, even nodding respectfully before returning to their vehicles. Davis lingered. Mr. Morrison, he said, and Henry realized the sergeant was looking at him now. My wife works at Mercy Falls Hospital. She's a nurse, Janet Pierce. She told me what you did, what it cost you. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card. My brother-in-law runs an auto shop 3 blocks from here. I called him while we were driving over. Your car will be fixed or replaced by tomorrow morning. No charge. Henry stared at the card. I can't. You can. Call it paying forward what these men paid for me. Davis smiled. Welcome home, brother. The police cars pulled away one by one, leaving only dust and the fading wail of sirens. Marcus turned to the assembled brotherhood, spread his arms wide. You see that's what we do. We show up, we stand together, and the world remembers what honor looks like. A cheer went up from 187 throats, not loud or aggressive, but deep, satisfied, the sound of men who'd proven a point without firing a shot. By evening, word had spread through Mercy Falls like signal fires on mountaintops. The Brotherhood had come to town, not causing trouble, helping, supporting, standing with one of their own. People started showing up at Rosie's diner. not to complain or protest, to share their stories, to bear witness to what the Brotherhood had built over 3 decades. An elderly woman named Margaret Hoffman arrived in a pickup truck older than most of the men present. She walked straight to Henry with purpose born of necessity, took his hands in hers with surprising strength. "You don't know me," she said, voice wavering but determined. "But 5 years ago, my husband Harold had a heart attack. Triple bypass surgery. We didn't have insurance, lost it when he got laid off at 63. The hospital wanted $73,000 up front or they wouldn't operate." She paused, tears forming. "The Brotherhood paid for everything, every penny. My Harold lived another 3 years because of them. Got to meet his great-grandchildren. Got to see his granddaughter graduate college. Got to die at home in his sleep instead of on a gurney in a parking lot." A younger man approached, Hispanic, maybe 40, with burn scars covering the left side of his face and neck. "Afghanistan 2011. IED took both my legs and most of my face. VA hospital said they'd get me prosthetics in 8 to 10 months. I was living in my sister's garage, couldn't work, couldn't drive, couldn't look at myself in a mirror without wanting to die." His voice steadied. "The Brotherhood got me prosthetics in 3 weeks. Got me into a vocational program. Got me therapy for PTSD I didn't even know I had. Got me a job at a machine shop where the owner's a veteran who doesn't care what I look like. Gave me my life back when I thought life was done with me." A teenager couldn't have been more than 16. Acne and braces and eyes that had seen too much too young spoke next. "My dad killed himself last year. Army infantry 3 tours in Iraq, came home with PTSD and nobody helped him. We were going to lose our house. Mum couldn't pay the mortgage on her salary alone. The Brotherhood paid it off. All of it. Then they gave my mum a job coordinating their family services program. We're okay now. Still sad, but okay. Because someone gave a damn." They kept coming. Dozens of them through the afternoon and into evening. Each with a story. Each with a debt they couldn't repay to an organization that never asked for repayment. Henry listened to all of them, trying to process the scale of what existed here. This wasn't just charity. It was systematic intervention in the space where bureaucracy failed and people fell through cracks wide enough to swallow lives. The Brotherhood had turned brotherhood from abstract concept to concrete action, from military necessity to civilian salvation. As the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold, another car entered the parking lot, a blue Honda Civic, dented and exhausted. Linda Morrison climbed out slowly, like movement hurt. Emma was with her. Henry's world narrowed to a pinpoint, then exploded outward. His granddaughter, thin, so impossibly thin, her beautiful curls reduced to wispy fragments by chemotherapy, saw him and lit up with the kind of joy that made his chest physically ache. "Grandpa!" Linda set her down. Emma ran with the awkward gait of someone whose body had been betrayed by disease, crashed into Henry's legs with force that nearly knocked him over. He scooped her up, felt her bird-bone lightness, her heart beating against his chest like a promise he thought he'd broken. "I missed you so much," Emma whispered into his neck. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Every second." Linda stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She'd been crying for days, probably. Anger and grief and fear all churning together into something that looked like exhaustion. "Jacob called me," she said, voice rough. "Explained everything. About Marcus. About what you did." "About?" She gestured at the assembled Brotherhood, the motorcycles, the impossible thing happening in a diner parking lot. "About all this. Linda, I'm so sorry." "Stop." Her voice cracked. "Don't apologize for being exactly who Michael would have wanted you to be, who Sarah raised you to be." Tears started again, carving tracks through makeup she'd probably put on this morning and cried off twice already. "I was angry. I am angry. But I was also wrong. You did the right thing. And I hate that the right thing almost destroyed us." Jacob appeared beside them, moving with the quiet competence of someone used to crisis. "It won't destroy you. We've got the money for Emma's treatment. All of it. Best pediatric oncology team in the state. She starts Monday morning if you approve." Linda's legs gave out. Jacob caught her, eased her onto a picnic table bench. She put her face in her hands and sobbed deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere profound and long denied. The kind of crying that happened when hope returned after you'd accepted its absence. Emma hugged Henry tighter. "Why is Mommy crying?" "Happy tears, sweetheart. Those are very happy tears." Marcus climbed onto the picnic table, waited for the murmur of conversation to quiet. When he had everyone's attention, Brotherhood locals, police officers who'd stayed, Rosie, still serving coffee like feeding warriors, was her life's calling, he spoke. We've got something else Henry needs to hear. Something we discovered. He opened a laptop someone had set up, turned it so Henry could see the screen. Medical records, photographs, a paper trail stretching back decades. After Jacob called me yesterday morning, I started digging, called in favors at the VA National Archives military records. Henry, do you remember pulling anyone else from Kisan besides Jacob? Someone on January 19th, 1969. Henry searched memory, sifting through faces and names and moments when seconds determined who lived and who became a statistic. There was a private. Young kid, couldn't have been more than 18. Shrapnel to the chest. I remember because... He stopped. Remembered. He kept calling for his mother. Kept saying, "Mama, I'm sorry, Mama, I'm sorry," over and over. Had a picture of her in his pocket. I held it where he could see it while I packed his wounds. Marcus nodded slowly. That private was David Taylor. He survived. Went home to South Carolina. Got married at 23. Had a daughter when he was 25. Named her Kelly. He died in 2003. Cancer got him at 52. The world tilted slightly. Kelly married young, Marcus continued. Had a son when she was 23. Named him Marcus, after her father's favourite uncle who died in World War II. He paused, let the silence build. The boy you saved yesterday in that hospital parking lot, Marcus Taylor, is the grandson of Private David Taylor, the Marine you saved 55 years ago. The numbers didn't make sense. Henry tried to process them, failed, tried again. 2 generations, 1 family, connected by 2 moments of crisis, separated by half a century. It gets better, Jacob said, pulling out his phone. Kelly. A woman emerged from the group of locals, mid-30s, black beautiful despite exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She carried a small cardboard box, worn and held together with packing tape yellowed by time. "Mr. Morrison." Her voice trembled with emotion barely contained. "My father died when I was 22. Before he passed, he gave me this box. Said it was the most important thing he owned. Said if I ever met the man who saved him, I should give it to him. Told me to find you, to thank you, to make sure you knew." She opened the box with reverent care. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that crinkled like old skin, was a purple heart. Beneath it, a letter, handwritten on paper, yellowed with age, creased from being folded and unfolded countless times. Henry took the letter with hands that shook. Read words written by a dead man to a stranger who'd saved him. To the medic who saved me. "I don't know your name. They wouldn't tell me before you got shipped out. But I know your face. I know your hands. I know the sound of your voice saying, 'Stay with me, Marine. Stay with me.'" I stayed. I went home. Married my high school sweetheart. Had a baby girl I named Kelly because it means warrior, and that's what her daddy learned to be. Lived a life I shouldn't have lived. Every breath I take because you crossed that field when no one else would. I'm giving this to my daughter. Told her to find you, to thank you. To make sure you understand that you didn't just save one life that day. You saved all the lives that came after. My daughter's life, my grandchildren's lives. The ripple goes on forever. Thank you for my life. Thank you for my family. Thank you for showing me what courage looks like when it costs everything. Semper Fidelis. Private David Taylor, USMC. The letter shook in Henry's hands. 43 years, 55 years, 2 generations, 3 if you counted Emma, a circle closing in ways that defied probability and demanded faith. "My son," Kelly said through tears, "is alive because you saved my father 55 years ago. Because you saved him I was born. Because I was born Marcus was born. And yesterday," her voice broke, "yesterday you saved him again. You gave me my family twice." She took Henry's hands, gripped them with strength born of gratitude beyond words. "How do I thank you for that? How does anyone thank you for that?" Henry couldn't speak. Couldn't form words around the thing expanding in his chest. Part grief, part joy, part something for which language had no adequate container. Marcus Reeves let the moment breathe, expand, settle into the bones of everyone present. Then he raised his voice to address the assembled crowd. "Brothers, we've got a decision to make. Mercy Falls Hospital fired a good man for doing good. They're billing him for saving a life. They've got policies that let children die if their parents can't pay." He paused, let the words land. "What do we do about that?" The roar that went up from 187 throats could have cracked the sky open and demanded justice from God himself. 6 months passed like water through cupped hands, inevitable, precious, impossible to hold once you tried. Emma Morrison's hair grew back in curls that bounced when she laughed, which happened often now. the bone marrow transplant had taken. The leukemia, that monster that had stalked her for 8 months, that had reduced her parents to desperation, and her grandfather to impossible choices, retreated into remission. Her doctors used words like miraculous and exceptional response, but Henry knew better. Miracles were just prayers with legs. Enough people had prayed for Emma to move mountains. He watched her now through the window of his office on the 3rd floor of Mercy Falls Hospital. She played in the courtyard below with 3 other children, all cancer survivors, all receiving treatment because of policies that no longer let money stand between children and life. Emma's laughter drifted up through the glass, and Henry felt something in his chest ease slightly. The brass nameplate on his door read, Henry Morrison, Patient Advocate and Director of Family Services. He'd been working this job for 5 months, 4 days a week, helping families navigate the labyrinth of medical bureaucracy. In that time, 217 families had come through his office. Not one had been turned away. Not one had been told their child wasn't worth saving because they couldn't produce a credit card. Linda worked down the hall coordinating between the hospital and the Brotherhood's outreach program. The anger that had defined her for months after Michael's death had transformed into something different. Purpose, maybe. The kind that came from turning grief into action, from making sure other families didn't fall through the same cracks that had nearly swallowed hers. Henry's phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Reeves. Turn on Channel 7, now. He found the remote, clicked on the wall-mounted TV. The local news anchor young woman, with the professionally concerned expression they all learned in broadcast school, sat across from a grey-haired man in an expensive suit. The caption read, Senator James Richardson, R.A.Z. Which is why I'm proud to announce the Morrison Medical Protection Act, the senator was saying, voice carrying the practiced sincerity of career politics mixed with something that might actually be genuine belief. Named after Henry Morrison, a Navy veteran and hospital security guard who was fired for saving a child's life. This federal legislation will protect healthcare workers who advocate for patients against institutional policies that prioritize profit over care. The screen cut to footage Henry recognized the parking lot at Mercy Falls Hospital 6 months ago. 187 motorcycles arranged in perfect formation, men in leather standing witness to the possibility of justice in an unjust system. Then, to Henry himself, walking into the hospital board meeting, looking old and tired and determined in ways that transcended physical presence. The Morrison Act, Senator Richardson continued, creates federal protections for healthcare whistleblowers. It mandates that emergency treatment cannot be denied based on insurance status. Violating hospitals face federal sanctions. It establishes independent oversight for hospital financial policies, and it creates a fund initially seeded with $5 million federal dollars to help families facing catastrophic medical costs. The anchor leaned forward with practiced interest. This is significant legislation, Senator. What are its chances of passing? It already has. Richardson's smile looked genuine. The bill was fast-tracked through committee with bipartisan support. When you're protecting people who protect patients, politics becomes refreshingly irrelevant. The president signs it into law next Tuesday at the White House. Mr. Morrison will be there. The segment ended. Henry sat in his office staring at the blank screen, trying to process what he'd just heard. His name, attached to federal law. His sacrifice. Emma's sacrifice. Linda's sacrifice. Transformed into something permanent. Something that would outlive all of them and protect people they'd never meet. The phone rang. Jacob Cross. You watching? Just saw it. There's more. Check your email. Right now. Henry opened his laptop, found the message from Jacob. Architectural renderings. Blueprints. A building 6 stories modern design, combining glass and steel with desert stone, looking like it grew from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. The heading read, Sarah Morrison, Memorial Center for Family Medical Assistance. He scrolled through images that seemed impossible. First floor free clinic, no insurance required, no questions about ability to pay. Second floor pharmacy and diagnostic services, everything at cost or free depending on need. Third and fourth floors transitional housing for families with sick children, apartments, not rooms. Fifth floor job training and placement services. Sixth floor school for children undergoing long-term treatment, staffed by teachers who understood that education couldn't stop just because cancer tried to kill you. Jacob, what is this? This is what we built. The Brotherhood plus donations that came in after your story went national. $12 million raised in 4 months. $4 million from the Brotherhood's reserves, $8 million from people who heard what you did and wanted to help. Jacob's voice carried pride and something deeper. Construction starts next week, opens in 6 months. Right here in Mercy Falls, 2 blocks from the hospital, walking distance. Henry's throat closed around words he couldn't form. You're naming it after Sarah. You gave your savings to save a stranger's child. That's Sarah's legacy as much as yours. You told me she taught you to do the right thing even when it costs everything. The center will serve an estimated 2,000 families per year. Medical care, housing, food, education, job, placement. Everything they need to survive crisis without falling apart. Henry looked at the rendering of the building that would bear his wife's name, tried to imagine Sarah's reaction, knew exactly what she'd say. Stop crying and get to work, Henry. People need help. Your wife would be proud, Jacob said quietly. She is, Henry whispered. There's one more thing. Jacob paused. We want you to run it. Director of Operations. You'd oversee everything, coordinate between doctors, social workers, housing managers, job counselors. Make sure it actually helps people, instead of becoming another bureaucracy that looks good on paper and fails in practice. Make sure families don't fall through cracks. I'm 69 years old, Jacob. How much time do I have left to build something like this? However much time you have, you'll spend it doing something that matters. That's more than most people get. That's more than most people even try for. Jacob let the silence breathe. What do you say? Henry thought about Sarah, about Michael, about Emma playing in the courtyard below, about Marcus Taylor and Kelly and Private David Taylor, and all the lives that connected across time in ways that seemed orchestrated by forces beyond understanding. About the strange mathematics of sacrifice, where giving everything away somehow left you richer than keeping it ever could. I say yes. Good. Press conference tomorrow at 10 a.m. Senator Richardson's flying in. Governor's coming. Bring Emma and Linda. This is family. The call ended. Henry sat alone in his office, watching children play in sunlight that painted everything gold, and felt the future taking shape around him like sculpture emerging from stone, not yet visible but definitely there, definitely real, definitely worth the cost. The press conference took place on an empty lot 2 blocks from Mercy Falls Hospital. Someone had erected a temporary stage with a podium bristling with microphones. Maybe 200 people sat in folding chairs arranged in neat rows. News crews from Phoenix, Tucson, even a national network that had helicoptered in equipment, and a correspondent with perfect hair. The Brotherhood formed a perimeter, 187 men in leather vests, standing watch, making sure nothing disrupted this moment. Henry stood backstage with Emma and Linda, Marcus and Jacob flanking them like honor guards who'd sworn oaths in blood. Emma wore a blue dress Sarah had bought 2 years ago before cancer, when the future seemed guaranteed rather than provisional. She'd grown into it now, was growing out of it. Soon she'd need a new dress. Soon she'd need a lot of things. But she'd be alive to need them. That was what mattered. You ready? Marcus asked. No. Good. The important stuff always comes when you're not ready. If you wait until you're ready, you wait forever. Senator Richardson spoke first, gave a speech about courage and policy and the intersection where individual action became systemic change. Then the governor talking about Arizona values and taking care of our own with sincerity that almost sounded unscripted. Then Carson Briggs from the hospital board announcing new policies that made Henry's job possible. Then Kelly Taylor holding Marcus's hand, telling the story of 2 men who'd saved her family 55 years apart, and how that should be impossible, but wasn't. Then Marcus Reeves called Henry to the stage. The applause was deafening. Henry walked to the podium feeling ancient and newborn simultaneously. 200 faces looked up at him with expressions that might have been hope or respect or gratitude or all 3 mixed together. He didn't know what to do with any of it. I'm not good at speeches, he said, and his voice cracked through speakers that made it sound larger than life. I'm better at doing than talking. But I've been asked to say something, so I'll say this. He looked at Emma sitting in the front row next to Linda, at Jacob and Marcus standing stage left, at the Brotherhood spread throughout the crowd like a safety net made of leather and loyalty, at the empty lot that would become something permanent. 6 months ago, I was a security guard who used his last dollar to save a dying child. I got fired, lost everything, thought my life was over. He paused, gathering words. Then the Brotherhood found me, reminded me I wasn't alone. That sacrifice isn't supposed to destroy you, it's supposed to connect you to something bigger than yourself, something that survives after you're gone. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. The Sarah Morrison Memorial Center isn't about me. It's not about the Brotherhood. It's about every person who's ever had to choose between medical care and rent, between medicine and food, between their child's life and financial destruction. His voice steadied. It's about making sure that choice doesn't exist anymore. At least not here. At least not for 2,000 families a year. At least not if we can help it. He gripped the podium, knuckles white. My wife Sarah used to say that goodness is contagious, that if you do one right thing, it spreads like ripples in water. Touch one life, and you touch all the lives connected to it forever. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, but the microphone caught every word. She was right. I saved Marcus Taylor. The Brotherhood saved me. Now we're building something that will save thousands. The ripples never end. They just keep going, touching people. We'll never meet changing lives. We'll never see proving that choosing right over easy still matters. He stepped back from the podium. The crowd rose as one applause building like thunder rolling across desert canyons, and Henry Morrison, 69 years old, Navy corpsman, father of a dead war hero and grandfather of a living miracle, finally understood what his life had been building toward. Not individual moments of heroism that faded when memory failed. Not just saving lives, but teaching others that lives were worth saving. Not just being good, but proving that goodness still won sometimes, that it had to win because the alternative was unbearable. 18 months after that press conference, the Sarah Morrison Memorial Center opened its doors on a Tuesday morning in May. The Arizona sun beat down on a building that seemed to grow organically from the desert itself, glass and stone and hope made manifest in steel and concrete. 400 people attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Emma, now 9 years old, cancer-free for 14 months, hair grown back in wild curls she refused to tame, did the honors with oversized ceremonial scissors that were probably a fire hazard. The ribbon fell away, and doors opened, and the future walked in, wearing the faces of people who needed help. The first family through the door was a young couple, early 30s, Hispanic, exhausted in ways that transcended physical tiredness. They carried a toddler with an oxygen tube in his nose and fear in his eyes. The father's hands shook as he approached the reception desk. "We heard someone told us you help people. Our son, he has a heart defect, needs surgery. We don't have insurance, the hospital won't." Linda Morrison, Director of Family Services, wearing a name tag and an expression of fierce competence, smiled. "You're in the right place. Have a seat. Let me get some information. We'll figure this out together." By noon, 43 families had registered for services. By the end of the first week, 217. By the end of the first month, the center had provided medical care to 612 people, housing to 89 families, job placement to 134 adults, and proof that systematic compassion could exist in America if someone built it deliberately. The ripples spread. Henry worked from an office on the 6th floor, coordinating between doctors and social workers and housing specialists and job counselors. He was 70 now, slower than he used to be, joints complaining about weather and stairs and time's inevitable advance. But his mind stayed sharp and his purpose stayed clear. Make sure no one fell through cracks. He interviewed every family personally, heard every story, learned every name, made sure each person understood they weren't charity cases or statistics, they were human beings who deserved help because being human should be enough. Marcus Reeves visited twice a month, checking operations, bringing news from the 22 other Brotherhood centers now operating nationwide. The organization had metastasized in the best possible way from 187 men on motorcycles to a network spanning all 50 states. 3,000 families helped annually had become 30,000. The Morrison Act had spawned similar legislation in 17 states. The ripples kept spreading in directions no one could predict or control. One afternoon in November, Henry sat in his office reviewing applications when Linda knocked. "Someone here to see you." A young man entered, mid-20s, white, wearing a Mercy Falls Community College sweatshirt and an expression of nervous determination. Something about his face seemed familiar, but Henry couldn't place it. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Marcus Taylor." Henry stood, extending his hand. "We've met. You were 8 years old when I met you. Hard to forget." "I was 8. I'm 25 now." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "I wanted to thank you again, and to tell you what happened after. What you started. You don't need to." "I do. Because you need to know how far the ripples go." Marcus sat, leaned forward. "After you saved me, after the Brotherhood helped my mom, after everything changed, I decided I wanted to be like you. Wanted to help people the way you helped me. So I went to nursing school. Just graduated 6 months ago. Got hired at Mercy Falls Hospital Pediatric Unit." Henry's chest tightened. "Last month a family came in. Car accident, their daughter, 7 years old, internal bleeding, needed emergency surgery. Parents didn't have insurance." Marcus smiled, and it transformed his face. "I did what you did. Used my savings. $8,200. Every penny I had. Got her treated. Hospital threatened to fire me for violating policy." "Marcus, no. Wait. Here's the part you need to hear." His smile widened. "The Brotherhood found out. Came to my disciplinary hearing. Got me reinstated with back pay and a formal apology. They also paid off my student loans, all $67,000 of it. Said it was their job to protect people who do the right thing. He pulled out a photograph, slid it across the desk. A little girl, maybe 7, dark hair in pigtails, bright smile despite the hospital gown. That's Sophia, the girl I saved. She's fine now, going home next week, and I kept my job. Because of what you taught me. Because of what the Brotherhood does. Because the cycle continues. Henry stared at the photograph, at another life saved, at proof that teaching by example worked better than teaching by lecture. You started something, Marcus said quietly. Not just the center, not just the law. You started this idea that we're supposed to take care of each other, that we're supposed to sacrifice for strangers because that's what good people do. I'm living proof it works. Sophia's living proof. There are hundreds of us now, maybe thousands, all because you crossed that parking lot with your last dollar. After Marcus left, Henry sat alone in his office as the sun set over the desert, painting everything in shades of gold and copper that made the world look like it was on fire in the best possible way. He thought about Private David Taylor calling for his mother in a firebase far away, about Jacob Cross buried under rubble in Fallujah, about Marcus bleeding in his mother's car, about Sophia saved by the man who'd been saved by the man who'd been saved by Henry. The mathematics of mercy, exponential and infinite. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma movie night. I'll make popcorn. Real butter, not that fake stuff. Henry smiled, feeling something loosen in his chest. Texted back. On my way. Extra butter. He drove home in a car that didn't break down, to a house that wasn't in foreclosure, to a granddaughter who was alive and laughing and growing into the kind of woman her father would have been proud of, and her grandmother already was. Emma met him at the door, arms around his waist in a hug that felt like coming home. Grandpa, we're watching the one with the robots that turn into cars. Again. It's a classic. Also, Linda made her famous chili, and there's cornbread. They made a mountain of popcorn and settled on the couch, Emma between Henry and Linda, a family reduced and rebuilt and still standing. The movie played, but Henry barely watched. He was thinking about tomorrow, about the 12 families scheduled for intake, about the new housing wing opening next month, about the nursing students who volunteered every weekend, learning that caring for people meant more than checking boxes on charts, about legacy and how it wasn't something you planned. It was something you lived one choice at a time, until the choices added up to something that mattered. 3 years after the Sarah Morrison Memorial Center opened, the Brotherhood of the Fallen held its annual gathering in Mercy Falls. 1,200 veterans from all 50 states converged on Arizona, representing all ages and all wars. They filled the center's expanded parking lot with motorcycles and the air with memories and the present with purpose that transcended nostalgia. Henry, 73, now moving slower but thinking clear, gave the keynote address. Not because he wanted to, but because they'd asked, and he'd learned you didn't say no to brothers who'd literally saved your life. When I was 25 years old, he began, voice carrying across a crowd that knew how to listen. I crossed a kill zone at Khe to save a Marine I didn't know, took a bullet for my trouble, thought that was the hardest thing I'd ever do. Veterans who understood hard things nodded in unison. I was wrong. The hardest thing I ever did was standing in a hospital parking lot at 68 years old, using my last dollar to save a stranger's child instead of my own granddaughter. That choice almost destroyed me. He paused, gathering strength. Would have destroyed me, except you found me. You reminded me that sacrifice isn't supposed to destroy, it's supposed to connect, to build, to prove that choosing right still matters. He looked at the assembled warriors, some young enough to be his grandchildren, some old enough to be his brothers, all connected by understanding that came from surviving things that should have killed you. We've helped 47,000 families in 3 years. The Morrison Act has protected 2,300 healthcare workers in 38 states. 23 centers like this one are operating nationwide, and 12 more are under construction. Yesterday I got a letter from a woman in Ohio. Her son needed a kidney transplant. Family couldn't afford it. A nurse at their local hospital used her own savings to help, got fired for it. The Brotherhood intervened. Nurse got her job back. Boy got his transplant. Hospital changed its policies. His voice cracked slightly. That nurse had never heard of me, never met anyone from the Brotherhood, but she'd heard the story. She knew what she was supposed to do. The ripples reached her across 800 miles. He gripped the podium knuckles, showing white. My wife Sarah died believing the world was full of good people doing their best. I've spent the last 3 years proving her right. Every family we help, every worker we protect, every child we save, that's Sarah's legacy. That's all of our legacies. Not what we took from the world, but what we gave. Not what we kept, but what we passed on. Not whether we won, but whether we tried. The applause rolled across the crowd like thunder across canyons. Henry stepped down from the podium, feeling every one of his 73 years and simultaneously feeling ageless, connected to something that transcended individual mortality. Later, as the sun set and the gathering transformed into celebration, Henry stood apart, watching. Linda was there, dancing with Emma, 12, now healthy, planning to study medicine when she grew up so she could help people like Grandpa helped people. Marcus Reeves was there, telling war stories to young veterans who needed to know they weren't alone. Jacob Cross was there, arm around Kelly Taylor, both watching Marcus, the boy they'd saved together, play with his cousins. Henry felt a presence beside him, turned. An old man stood there, late 70s, bent with age, but eyes still sharp, wearing a brotherhood vest covered in patches. "You don't remember me," the man said, "but I remember you. Kay San, January 19th, 1969. Private David Taylor. You carried me 300 yards with a sucking chest wound, held my mother's picture where I could see her face, told me I was going home, promised me." Henry stared. David Taylor. Died in 2003, except he was standing right here, breathing and talking, and definitely not dead. "The cancer got me in 2003, David said, reading confusion on Henry's face. "Stage 4 pancreatic. 6 months to live, they said. I died on the operating table, flatline for 4 minutes. He smiled. "They brought me back. Experimental treatment. I've been living on borrowed time for 20 years, time you gave me 55 years ago. They stood together in silence. Two old men who shouldn't have lived past their 20s, watching families that shouldn't exist, laugh and dance and live. "Thank you for my life," David said quietly. "Thank you for my daughter. Thank you for my grandson. Thank you for teaching him what it means to be saved and to save. Thank you for proving that the right thing is still the right thing, even when it costs everything." Henry couldn't speak, could only nod, could only feel the weight and lightness of everything he'd done and survived and sacrificed and built. David Taylor shook his hand one more time, then walked away, disappearing into the crowd that was his legacy, and Henry's legacy, and everyone's legacy, all mixed together in ways that defied separation. 5 years after that gathering, Henry Morrison woke on a Tuesday morning in October, feeling wrong. Not sick exactly, not in pain, just complete. Like a book reaching its final page. Like a song finding its resolution. Like a race ending, and the finish line coming into view. He was 78. Emma was 17, applying to medical schools, already accepted to 3 with full scholarships funded by the Brotherhood's education program. Linda had remarried 2 years ago, a good man named Tom, a teacher, someone who understood that Michael would always be her first love and never competed with ghosts. The Sarah Morrison Memorial Center had expanded twice, now served 12,000 families per year across 8 locations spanning Arizona and New Mexico. The Brotherhood had grown to 15,000 members. The Morrison Act had been strengthened, twice expanded in scope, copied by 4 other countries trying to figure out how America had accidentally done something right. 7,000 healthcare workers had been protected by its provisions. Hundreds of thousands of people had received care they would have been denied. The ripples had become waves. The waves had become tides. The tides had changed coastlines. Henry got dressed, slowly, drove to the center, sat in his office, looking out over buildings that bore his wife's name and his work and the sacrifice of countless people who'd chosen goodness over comfort, helping over ignoring action over apathy. Marcus Reeves called around 10 a.m. "How you feeling, brother?" "Tired." "Good tired or bad tired?" Henry thought about it, really thought. "Complete tired. Like I've done what I needed to do." Silence on the line for 3 heartbeats. Then, "We're coming." "Marcus, you don't need to. We're coming. All of us. You don't stand alone. Not at the beginning, not at the end, not ever." They arrived that evening as the sun painted the desert in shades of fire. Not 187 motorcycles this time. Nearly 1,000. Veterans from across the country dropping everything, making the pilgrimage to Mercy Falls because one of their own needed them. They didn't come to save him. Death came for everyone, eventually even warriors. They came to stand with him, to let him know he didn't end alone, to prove that brotherhood transcended mortality. Henry stood in the parking lot of the Sarah Morrison Memorial Center, surrounded by men and women who'd spent decades proving that honor wasn't dead, that sacrifice mattered, that goodness won more often than cynicism admitted. Emma stood beside him, holding his hand. Linda on his other side. Jacob and Marcus and Kelly and young Marcus, 22, now a nurse already saving lives and getting fired for it, and getting saved by the Brotherhood in turn. "Thank you," Henry said, not to anyone specific. To all of them. To the universe that had let him live this long and do this much. To Sarah, wherever she was. To Michael. To every Marine he'd carried and every family he'd helped. Marcus Reeves stepped forward carrying something wrapped in dark cloth. He unfolded it with ceremonial care. A flag. American flag, worn and faded patches visible where it had been repaired by hands that understood the value of things worth keeping. "This flag flew over Khe San," Marcus said, voice carrying across assembled warriors. "Over Fallujah, over Kandahar, over every place where Brotherhood members served and bled and died and somehow survived anyway. We give it to members who've completed their mission, who've done what they were supposed to do and done it well." He handed it to Henry with both hands. "You've completed your mission, brother. You carried us home, all of us, every single one. Now rest." 1,000 veterans stood at attention, raised their hands in salute that they held until Marcus lowered his own hand. Henry clutched the flag, felt its weight light as cloth, heavy as history, precious as purpose. Felt Sarah's presence and Michael's and every Marine he'd saved and every family he'd helped. Felt the impossible mathematics of a life well lived, where giving everything away somehow left you richer than keeping ever could. "Semper Fidelis," he whispered. "Semper Fidelis." 1,000 voices answered in unison that sounded like thunder and felt like home. Henry Morrison didn't die that night. Didn't die that year. He lived another 7 years by the calendar, but time became less relevant as purpose deepened. He worked part-time at the center mentoring young social workers, telling stories to anyone who'd listen, proving daily that age diminished capability but not value. He lived to see Emma graduate medical school, Johns Hopkins, top of her class, specializing in pediatric oncology, because of course she did. He lived to see her save her first life, to see understanding dawn in her eyes. This is what Grandpa meant. This is why it matters. This is what we're for. He lived to see the Morrison Act expanded into the Morrison-Taylor Healthcare Protection Bill, named after him and the Marine he'd saved, and the boy that Marine's grandson had become. He lived to see 42 states adopt similar legislation. He lived to see the Brotherhood grow to 25,000 members, helping 250,000 families annually. He lived to see the ripples become tsunamis that reshaped how America thought about healthcare and sacrifice, and what citizens owed each other in a civilization supposedly worth preserving. When death finally came peacefully in his sleep in his own bed surrounded by family, he went knowing he'd done what he'd set out to do, and more besides. He went complete. He went home. The funeral was held at the Sarah Morrison Memorial Center, with overflow crowds in the parking lot watching on screens. 15,000 people attended. The service lasted 4 hours. The procession stretched for 3 miles, 2,000 motorcycles carrying a warrior home one final time, engines rumbling like the heartbeat of something that refused to die just because one man had. They buried him with full military honors at Mercy Falls Memorial Cemetery beside Sarah, under Arizona skies so blue it hurt to look at directly. 21-gun salute. Taps played on a bugle that had been to every American war since Vietnam. A flag folded with precision born of practice and handed to Emma, who wept for the grandfather who'd taught her that sacrifice wasn't loss. It was investment in futures you wouldn't see, but could trust would arrive anyway. Marcus Reeves, 84 years old, still leading, still believing, gave the eulogy in a voice that carried despite his age. "Henry Morrison saved my life in 1969. Saved Marcus Taylor's life in 2024. In between and after he saved thousands more, not through violence, not through force, but through the simple, radical act of choosing goodness when goodness cost everything." He paused, looking at assembled thousands who'd come to bear witness. "We called ourselves the Brotherhood of the Fallen because we fell in war and were raised up by men like Henry. But we were wrong about the name. We're not the Brotherhood of the Fallen, we're the Brotherhood of the Carried. Carried home by people who wouldn't let us die alone. Carried forward by people who showed us what we were supposed to do next. Carried into legacy by people who proved that one good act repeated across time can change the world in ways that matter." He raised his fist in the salute that had become their signature. "Henry Morrison taught us how to carry each other, how to stand with the weak, how to protect the good, how to turn sacrifice into salvation. He taught us that kindness doesn't end. It multiplies across time and space and generations in ways we can't predict but can trust. That honor isn't obsolete, that we're not alone. Ever." 15,000 fists raised in response, a salute that would have made Henry uncomfortable and proud simultaneously. "Rest easy, brother," Marcus said, voice finally cracking with emotion held at bay through discipline and will. "Your mission is complete. We've got it from here." The ceremony ended slowly, reluctantly, like leaving would make it final in ways standing still somehow prevented. Emma stood beside the grave with Linda and Tom and young Marcus and Kelly and Jacob and everyone who'd been saved and everyone who'd done the saving, all of them connected by threads invisible but unbreakable. "He did good," Emma said quietly, staring at the casket holding the man who'd taught her everything that mattered. "He did better than good," Marcus replied. "He showed us how." "That's worth more than good. That's immortal." They walked away together, 3 generations connected by sacrifice and salvation, heading toward futures Henry Morrison had helped build. Behind them, 2,000 motorcycles started their engines in sequence, the sound rolling across the cemetery like a promise being renewed. The brotherhood never forgets. The brotherhood never stops. The brotherhood carries on. Epilogue. 10 years later. Dr. Emma Morrison, 27 years old, pediatric oncology resident at Mercy Falls Hospital, following in her grandfather's footsteps in ways that transcended profession, stood in the parking lot at 3 in the morning. Her shift had ended 2 hours ago, but she'd stayed to sit with a 7-year-old girl whose parents couldn't afford her leukemia treatment. Emma had used her own money, $4,000, every penny of her signing bonus. Got the girl admitted, got treatment started, got herself fired for violating hospital policy about personal financial involvement with patients. Now she stood alone in the parking lot where her grandfather had stood 28 years earlier, wondering if she'd just destroyed her career to save a child she barely knew. Then she heard it. Faint at first, growing steadily. A sound that could have been thunder, but wasn't because the sky was clear and stars were visible, and the sound had rhythm that weather lacked. Emma turned toward Route 89 and smiled despite exhaustion, despite fear, despite everything. On the horizon, headlights appeared. Dozens of them, then hundreds. 2,000 motorcycles rolled toward Mercy Falls Hospital in formation so perfect it looked computer-generated. The lead rider, young Marcus Taylor, 43 years old, now president of the Brotherhood, grandson of a saved Marine, son of a saved woman, living proof that ripples never truly ended, raised his fist as he approached. Every engine cut off simultaneously. In the silence that followed, Marcus dismounted and walked to Emma with the deliberate pace of someone who knew exactly what needed to happen next. "Dr. Morrison," he said formally, then smiled. "Your grandfather would be proud and horrified in equal measure. Proud because you did the right thing, horrified because you thought you'd have to do it alone." 2,000 warriors stood beside their motorcycles bearing witness. "We heard you did something stupid and brave," Marcus continued. "Just like Henry did. Just like I did. Just like hundreds of us have done because he taught us that sacrifice for strangers is what separates civilization from barbarism." His smile widened. "Don't worry. We've got you. Hospital's already backing down. Girls getting full treatment. You're keeping your job with an apology and a raise. The Brotherhood doesn't let our own fall. Not ever. Not for any reason." Emma's vision blurred with tears she hadn't known she was holding back. "Your grandfather started something," Marcus said quietly. "Not just the center. Not just the law, not just the Brotherhood. He started this idea that we're supposed to take care of each other, that we're supposed to sacrifice for strangers because that's what good people do, that kindness doesn't end, it multiplies across time and space until the whole world changes in ways we can't predict but can trust." He stepped back, raised his voice to address the assembled Brotherhood. "Brothers and sisters, Dr. Emma Morrison has carried on her grandfather's legacy. She chose right over easy. She sacrificed for a stranger. She proved that Henry Morrison's teachings didn't die with him. They live in everyone he touched and everyone they touch in turn. She is one of us. She always was. She always will be." 2,000 voices raised in affirmation that shook the desert night. Emma stood in the parking lot where her grandfather had stood, where Marcus Taylor had almost died, where everything had changed 28 years ago because one man chose sacrifice over safety. She felt connected to something larger than herself, to a chain of goodness stretching back through time and forward into futures she'd never see, but could trust would arrive. She squared her shoulders facing the hospital where she'd just sacrificed her career, surrounded by proof that sacrifice didn't end in destruction. It ended in legacy, it ended in brotherhood, it ended in the simple, radical, revolutionary truth that Henry Morrison had spent his life teaching. Kindness doesn't end, it multiplies, forever.